Chapter 21. Second Childhood is More Fun Than the First, Part 2. The old man had squirreled away a supply of hand-hewn philosophy to fit most moods and conditions, and he was very fond of saying that a man was nothing but a boy grown old. He liked to say that if a feller was raised right, it was powerful difficult to beat the boy out of him, no matter how many hard knocks he absorbed in the painful process of achieving maturity. The measure of a grown man, the old man said, is just how much tomfoolery he can get away with when he's got gray in his whiskers without appearing to be a damn fool. I ain't referring to coon chasing and such like, because anybody that runs around tearing up his clothes in the woods at night behind a pack of hounds on the off chance they'll tree a coon is just looking for an excuse to get drunk and fall in a briar patch. The old man did not utter these sage words, however, when he and Tom and Pete, the half-Injun woodsman, decided to quench my thirst of youthful adventure and whip me off to what he referred to as a pig-sticking expedition. We were, as I was saying, supposed to be what we called Bengal lancers, and we were going to hunt pigs the hard way, not sticking them with a lance on horseback as the lancers did in India, but using hounds to course them, and after that it was every man and pig for himself. In our neck of the woods, we had what is called a razorback, a tame pig run wild and breeding to more wild hogs, until he produces a wild animal every bit as mean as anything that started off in the swamps. He ain't so big as one of those Russian-y boars they have in the mountains, but he's just as ornery. He's spread out through the East Carolinas all the way down through the Everglades in Florida. The first thing we did on this notable expedition was to stop at Big Abner's farm. Big Abner looked to be about 7 feet tall. He was sort of purple-black, weighed about 250 pounds, and he had about 20 children, or so it seemed. He also had several covey of quail that used around his pea field. He had some deer and turkey and foxes and wildcats that hung out in the Big Branch swamp, that is, which ran through his property, and he had pigs. His eyes lit up when the old man asked him if he had seen any lately. "Yes, up, Cap'n," he said. "Sho is. Dey's a passel of 'em using down in de branch. One big old boar, too. I run him up the other day when I was minding some traps, and he roared at me like a lion. Got tusks on him, turned right back to his eyes. Dat a mean hog. Got some mean sow with him, too, and a whole mess of shouts. I like mighty well get a hold of a couple of dem shouts before they tough up like the old fella. We thought we'd give the boy here a pig hunt," the old man said. "We got the hounds, but we need some mules and some young'uns. Come on over to the well and we'll work this thing out." The well, I knew, was where a half-gallon jug of Scuppernong wine dwelt in the cool depths. By and by the grown men came back smiling. "We'll make us a camp," the old man said, "and we'll start out bright and early in the morning. We need a good night's rest for this business. You have the young'uns ready before light, hey, Abner?" "Yes, Cap'n," Big Abner said. "We's be ready." We got back in the Liz and drove off the main road a few miles to a place we'd camped before when we were after turkey or deer. It was on Abner's land, and it was a place nobody else ever used because Abner was very strict about keeping his land posted. He leased a lot of land, mostly for the turpentine rights, and he didn't hold with strangers who were apt to get the broom grass alight with careless cigarettes and burn up a whole lot of valuable pitch pine. It was a lovely hunting country. There were big stands of tall half-leaf pine, and their bowls chopped to make the pockets in which the big, waxy, grape-like clusters of sap gathered. If you knocked off one of these knobs of congealed sap, it had the same consistency as chewing gum, and was cleanly aromatic on the tongue. These big piney wood stands had very little undergrowth beneath them because their tall umbrella tops shut out the sun. The ground underneath these giant trees was strewn with long brown needles as clean as a carpet and as slippery as glass. The sun made little golden pools and flecks of light on this carpet, but mostly the shade was as somberly solemn as a church. It got very spooky along about dusk when the doves began to complain and the night air started to turn gently cool. The tall pine thickets held to the high ground, but their outskirts were cut over patches of scrubby oak and seedling pine, with a lot of old dead stuff on the ground, making little hummocks and high ridges of fallen trees. lichen stumps and shiny green gallberry bushes. These islands, for they were literally islands, were where you found most of the quail after you started them out of the broom grass or the cornfields or pea patches. Vast sweeps of broom sedge dotted with the occasional islands made up a rolling yellow sea. The quail roosted in the brooms away from the varmints that inhabited the swamp. Sometimes they flushed from the fields and scattered in the broom, and anybody with a good single bird dog could shoot his limit if he had a mind to and didn't care about leaving anything for next year. But mostly the flushed birds pitched on sides of the swamp in a little island, or sometimes flew straight through and dropped on a scrubby hill on the other side. They seldom lit in the big pine thickets, no cover, and even less seldom in the swamps, varmints. But the deer and the wild pigs and the occasional wildcat hunted the swamps, as did the rare black bear. The deer and the pig fed out at night, wrecked the cornfields, and rooting up the goobers. The pigs were particularly death on the pea fields, both peanut and black-eyed field peas, while the deer gormandized young corn and the tender green rye. The plan of campaign, the old man was saying now, is to pick up some pig sign and start the dog. Then we'll send the pickaninnies in behind the dogs, some of them, and stake out some more on the flanks, and we'll beat them pigs right out into the open. We'll run 'em into the grass and ride 'em down on the mules. You, boy, he said to me, you're the head lancer. You're the boss pig sticker. What'll I stick him with? I asked. I plumb forgot to bring my lance. A pitchfork is plenty good enough to start with, the old man said. If a pig gets close enough to bite you, a pitchfork is all you need. Come in handy, especially if you fall off the mule. What'll you use? I asked, kind of nervous. Another pitchfork? Nope, the old man replied. I'm the head shakiri of this shebang. I'm the native gun bearer. I'm too old for pitchforks. I'll stick to this old pump gun of mine. Tom's got his rifle. Pete'll back you up with his double barrel. But a real classy pig sticker shouldn't need any help from guns. It ain't supposed to be sportin', not that way. I've read about it. Kipling wouldn't approve of it for certain. When everybody but me laughed again, it seemed to me that there was an awful lot of unnecessary laughing going on for a bunch of grown men. Mostly they were serious hunters when it had to do with deer, or ducks, or quail, or turkey, but every time anybody said pig, somebody else snickered. I wouldn't trouble you with the camp making, because one good camp is just like another. That is to say, I did most of the work, such as chopping wood, splitting kindling, going for water, cutting pine tops for beds, while the men lazed around investigating something ripe-smelling in a fruit jar. We had a fine meal of cornbread, fried ham, and eggs, and I went to sleep wondering what devilment these grown-up children had in store for me. I only had a short dream to wait before somebody shook me awake in the chill dawn, and I scrubbed the sleep out of my eyes with my knuckles. By the time I'd been to the branch for water, Big Abner and his tribe had arrived. He had evidently drummed up some nieces and nephews for what appeared to be an army of young black faces swarming around him. At least a dozen dogs of indeterminate breed accompanied Big Abner's relatives, and they were snapping and snarling amongst themselves. Old Bell and Blue, our borrowed hounds, looked sleepy-eyed and bored as the curs scuffed and yipped. 4 mules, their ears drooped in the dawn's shifting light, were wearing battle array of wooden working hames and a saddle blanket with the reins looped over the hames. I noticed then that each of Abner's troop had a tin pot or pan of some description, and each carried a short club. Now, the old man grinned, the idea is that you and me and Pete will ride out to the far end of the swamp and take up stations in the broom grass. Tom will take Bell and Blue and go to the pea patch and pick up some hog sign. The hogs will naturally go into the branch, and then we'll turn the beaters and the other dogs loose. The beaters will pound on the pans, and the other dogs will take up the trail, and if all goes well, we'll beat the pigs back out into the clear, I think. The old man said in a loud aside to Pete and Tom, I think this is the way you are supposed to do her. Personally, all I ever did was read about it in a book. If things go wrong, I ain't responsible. What do I do in all this? I asked, wishing I'd kept my mouth shut about wanting to go off to India or shoot tiger and Africa to shoot lions before I was too old to enjoy it. Why, the old man said, it's the easiest thing in the world. You just kick the mule in the ribs and charge the pig. The pig will be charging you, of course, if he's worth the salt to cure him into ham. And when you and the pig meet, you kind of lean over the mule and stick him with the pitchfork. With all them hayfork tines, I don't see how you could miss him. If you should fall off the mule, I'd try not to lose a holt of that pitchfork. These pigs can turn mighty nasty if they think they got you cornered. I was mumbling when I climbed aboard the mule. Under that blanket, the mule had a backbone any razorback hog would have been proud of. The mule turned his head and looked at me. He shook his head in what seemed to be disgust. Tom took his mule by the reins and the dogs by their leads, and went off toward the pea field, with his rifle tucked under one arm. Between the two hounds and the mule and the rifle, he seemed to have considerable on his hands. I had considerable on my hands, too, with this consarn mule. I never did put too much trust in horses, and none at all in mules. And this wall-eyed son of a roving jackass seemed to sense my lack of appreciation of his nobler qualities. He reminded me in some ways of a billy goat I had once, only he was bigger and constructed a heap higher off the ground. They say mules have sure feet. This big gray critter stumbled and almost fell every time he took a step. It looked like half a mile from his back to the ground. Clutching the pitchfork with one hand, as it was all I could do to hang on to him with the other. We shambled along to the bottleneck end of the swamp, where the thick stuff cleared and emptied it out into the broom grass. Pete and the old man didn't seem to be doing much better than I was with mules. I reckon ain't built to be ridden as a steady thing, not even by Sancho Panza. We got to the end of the swamp and heard the dogs tune up and then settle into a steady bawling as they hit a hot trail. The tune was loud and clear, and then suddenly was punctuated with angry growls and barks. 2 rifle shots snapped in the keen morning air, and then there was a whole lot of yipping and yapping. Then came an unholy sound of pans and buckets being beaten with sticks. The clattering and banging relieved by squeals and growls and barking and yelling. I never heard such a mess of assorted noise in all my born days. There was a crashing of brush in the swamp on top of all the other noise, and I heard the old man let out a whoop and a holler. "Get set, here they come!" And here they came indeed. A couple of lengths ahead of the mob was a big old sow, with Blue hanging on one ear and old Belle dug into the other. The sow was making pretty good way in the grass, though, and she was squealing her head off, swinging her head from side to side, while she tried to dislodge the dogs. Behind the old sow came a litter of half-grown pigs, all squealing, and behind the pigs came all the feist dogs the Abner children had imported. And behind the dogs, the Abner children were running, beating on the pots and pans, hollering to fit to kill. Puffing behind the young'uns was Big Abner, and behind Big Abner was Tom, cussing steadily and hauling away on his mule, which had its front feet braced and was giving Tom quite an argument. One of the bigger pigs spied my mule and more or less charged it. I made a frantic stab at it with the pitchfork, and missed, of course. The squealing pig ran between the mule's legs, and the mule bucked, and I flew through the air to land with a thump on the ground. Just before I was engulfed by a flood of pigs, dogs, and Negro children, I heard the old man yelling, "Whoa, you dumb fool!" and some more sulphury cuss words before he hit the ground with a thump, too. I didn't see this happen, of course, being submerged in pigs and dogs. But Pete's mule got its head and run off under a low-hanging tree branch and scraped Pete off, knocking him cold for a minute. It was quite a party, I reckon. Some of the smaller dogs took ear-holds on some of the smaller pigs, and the squealing increased. The problem of separating the dogs from the pigs seemed insurmountable, until Big Abner produced some crocus sacks, and the pigs were sort of decanted from the dogs into the tow sacks, where they continued to kick and squeal. The big dogs, Belle and Blue, finally slowed the old sow down to a walk. She was too big to handle, so Big Abner hit her over the head with a club and tied her feet while she was dreaming. All told, it was a pretty good haul. A half-dozen prime pigs and 1 sow for Big Abner to pen up against hog-killing time. "Where's the boar?" I asked Tom, who finally came up without his mule. "Where's your mule?" "I tied the damn thing to a tree," Tom said. "Shot the boar. He was too big to play with. Somebody might have got hurt. Wait till you see them tusks, big as an elephant. Lay a dog or you open like you'd rip it into a sack of meal." He shook He took two, Ned, Tom said to the old man. I reckon him to be tougher than a bear to kill dead. Just as well you shot him, the old man said. Our Bengal lancer here, he fell off the mule right off, lost his lance, and got run over by the whole passel of hogs, dogs, and young'uns. I reckon that big old wild boar would have ate him alive. I reckon I ain't the only one fell off a mule, I said. I saw you fall off and Pete got scraped off. I reckon that big boar would have ate you all too if Tom hadn't shot him in self-defense. It was either that or climb a tree, Tom muttered, and not the first time neither. I'd as live take on a panther as a big pig. It turned out that the old man had told Tom to shoot the boar because fun's fun, and he didn't want any dogs or boys hurt in this horseplay or pig play, I reckon you'd call it. I understood why when we skinned out the pig. He had a hide on him nearly an inch thick. It was white like coconut meat under the thin black hair, but so tough Big Abner had to keep wetting his ripping knife when they were shucking off the hide. His tusks did curl up nearly to his nasty little eyes, but the tusks, Pete said, weren't what did the damage. He dug with his tusks, but fought with a jaw tooth that whetted itself sharp against the underside of the tusk and would slash you like a knife. With his bristly reddish mane that stuck up from behind his big head and ran all the way to his haunches down his sloping spine, he was a nasty-looking wild animal as I ever saw. I guess I was a pretty sight when we got the mules, pigs, hounds, feist dogs, pickaninnies, and other hog hunters back to the camp. I was full of mud where I'd been run over by the pack and owned a fresh set of bruises where I'd been tromped on. Tom and Pete and the old man seemed to think I was a very funny sight, and they kept kidding me about losing my pitchfork until the joke wore itself out. I reckon this boy will never make a real pig hunter in the classic tradition, the old man said that night while fire warmed his feet and something else warmed his innards. Some people are just born pig hunters, others ain't. Our young feller here just ain't a real dedicated pig sticker. We better give him back to the easy stuff like birds. Certain sure thing I wouldn't trust him with tigers and lions. I didn't say much then, but I was thinking about how little it took to amuse grown people. I was thinking the same thing not so long ago in Africa, several lions and tigers later, not to mention years. I was having a high old time trying to get a warthog to come out of a hole, and I wondered bitterly how the old man would have managed it. This occurred to me when I was halfway up a thorn tree after the pig did decide to come out of the hole. I reckoned I had finally become a pig hunter in the classic tradition, even if it was a little thorny coming down out of the tree.